Hey everyone, welcome back to Stats Chat, the one-man video podcast series thing with me, Z for Carlo, everyone's favourite salty A Song of Ice and Fire know-it-all. Of course, last week I did a video on a relatively, slightly, shall we say, controversial topic with a probably more controversial title given to the video. That is, of course, whether or not the A Song of Ice and Fire tournament kind of scene is dying, whether or not that is fading away, maybe why that might be, or why people might be having issues with the upcoming Mother of Dragons and Mammoths that are coming along. I tried to give a balanced response, as always, I'm just trying to comment on the kind of things that I'm seeing constantly going on in the community discussions on the Discord, on Facebook. There are still tons of posts after and before that about, things that need to change in the game, why people don't want to play, stuff like that. So, I'm trying to comment on that as opposed to, shall we say, like, fan the flames or say that it is dead myself or anything like that. Of course, like 150 comments later on that video, most viewed video that I've ever had, because of the controversy surrounding the topic, shall we say. Plenty of comments of those clearly show that they never even watched the video. They just kind of saw the title and thought it was a good chance to come and have an argument. So, a lot of those I don't respond to. I did respond to quite a few. There's lots of people having interesting discussions, and I think it did bring up some useful discussion in some places. Of course, in the past week, I would definitely not think in response to that video, but I do hope, I really genuinely hope, in response to the fact that Simon are aware that all the discussion currently is around the fact that the game is not going forward. The tournament scene is absolutely non-existent. And I'm talking about TTS and in person, so, please don't just be like, oh, yeah, but COVID, don't be stupid. Of course the tournament scene's dead. No, we're talking about online as well. People's enthusiasm for the game is very low. That's the undercurrent that we're talking about. You can blame it on COVID, but I'm actually talking like basically in comparison to other games, Legion is still doing fine. Marvelous Crisis Protocol doing absolutely great at the moment. All these other games have survived the past 6 months in COVID without these issues. So we can't say that COVID is the problem itself. Anyway, in response to the fact that the community are talking about these things, I think they have released a new tournament document. I guess that's what we'll talk about today. Talk about, in general, some new tournament formats and stuff like that, because it's actually something that I've been working on. And before Mother of Dragons and Mammoth seemed like such a huge thing, the World Cup, which I will talk about in a bit later, I was going to launch a new tournament format for that. And now I'm basically going to test that out over the next couple of months to really get it going, because in the current climate, I don't think that they're addressing some balance issues, and that's what's creating a lot of the fatigue, in my opinion. We see the same things just win again and again. So even though the ELO system that I built doesn't reward the player for their ranking, in terms of, you just keep winning with the same commanders every week, the ELO system will penalize you very, very heavily for that, but a tournament won't. The tournament will still just say, well, you won all your games, therefore you won the tournament. It doesn't care that Howland is expected to win 90% of his games against Targaryens anyway. So, it's kind of a tournament system that will hopefully fight that kind of that issue. Anyway. What we're actually going to talk about first, at least, is the tournament document, the team tournament document that Simon have released. So let's have a little fly on over to that. Hopefully you will have seen it. If not, then, go and have a look. But I'll fly through it with you now. It's the normal kind of stuff. The first thing that is, of real importance is the fact that it has list building restraints. So entirely, completely standard for a team format is that all players of a team must use different factions. We're obviously at 7 factions now for Song of Ice and Fire. Everyone believes that Greyjoys will be soon. They should have already been out in Q4, but it looks like maybe Q1 2021 now. So that will bring us up to 8 factions, which, to play 3 or 4 players on a team, that's plenty. We don't need to worry about that. So everybody must be members of the same team, cannot play the same faction. Completely normal. The interesting one is that they've decided that each neutral character, that's attachments, NCUs, and commanders, can only be fielded in one player's lists. Lists, plural, including the lists of one player. So if I'm the person fielding Walder, then I can include Walder in both of my lists, it sounds like, but none of the other players in the team can field that same neutral character. Interesting distinction. Possibly an acceptance that they still don't particularly know what to do with neutrals. That is followed up by a team member playing the neutral faction does not count in that limit and include a character included in somebody else's list. That gives some reason, some viability to neutrals about why they should be played when we consider that neutrals are incredibly low ranked. And I think soon enough, with Targaryens getting a bit better, neutrals will become the bottom ranked faction. There is a value to playing them if other people can't use your NCUs, can't use their commanders. Neutral commanders don't see a huge lot of use, really, to be honest, in other factions, but the neutral NCUs do a lot. Most factions will be fine. Funnily enough, the low-rated factions are the ones that will be hurt the most by this. Targaryens still generally rely on neutral NCUs because they don't have a good enough, big enough selection of their own. There are other specific cases. Lannisters do tend to lean on them a bit. It's a fine rule. Yeah, I mean, I think it's acceptable. Sure, if they want to go with that. Makes free folk even a bit better, again, because they don't use the neutrals. So really, I think a lot of competitive lists, or almost every team, will include free folk, because that's one less team that has to argue about who gets the most powerful NCUs. They have their own pool of non-neutrals to pick from. It is what it is. I believe there are some ramifications which might be overlooked. I think there's a lot of rock, paper, scissors in the game at the moment, and that's a lot why we see Walder, why we see Varys so much, because they take away your opponent's ability to just put something on the table that you can't beat. And I do think that exists. So if you don't have Walder, if you can't have Walder and Varys, if you don't have Walder, then direwolves become even more of a problem. That's not to say, oh god, it's a direwolves issue again. That's just the obvious answer, which is direwolves are mostly answered by most people by playing Walder, and that at least puts some pressure onto a low health, low wound solo like the direwolf or the soon coming Watch Marshal and all that stuff. In response to that, on the flip side, they are extremely vulnerable to a Roose and Axel NCU combo. They will just die to Axel NCU. That's why this list will nearly always include Varys, because it at least gives you a good chance to deny that, gives you a good fighting chance. And we end up with this rock, paper, scissors triangle, which is, if I don't have Walder and I'm playing whatever faction, Lannisters, and I play into Starks, they have these direwolves, then I'm just going to lose. But if I'm Starks and I don't use Varys and I play into Axel, I'm just going to lose. That's a massive oversimplification of the problem. But point is that there is this triangle of this will beat this large majority of the time. This will beat this large majority of the time. But actually, again, that Axel list isn't very strong and will lose to most other lists. The 2-list format, of course, gives some viability there. But I think that it's quite a strong. I think it's still very, very strong that it exists. in this game, and I think to me that's a large part of what people's issue around dragons and mammoths is that they're another tool, another very strong indication of rock paper scissors. A good example is dragons. People have shown that of the 7 cards in the Lannister base deck, 4 of them do nothing to dragons, like literally have no effect upon dragons. Now if your opponent is putting triple dragon mother of dragons down, and more than half of your base deck cannot interact with them because they can't fail morale tests, then you're gonna have a tough ride, right? Like, that's a tough game. So we see that as an issue. I do see that could be a possible issue, and that is why neutrals, those specific neutral tools, are used so often, because they help to balance out this set of like rock paper scissors. They give you something, they give you some way to fight against it. Anyway, moving on. That's what it is. Neutrals only appear in one thing. I think it's a almost expected, almost normal list building stipulation for them to use in it. Does make list variety higher, so that is good. And there is, in a minute, we'll talk about the way the teams are paired here now. So there is some way of avoiding these rock, paper, scissors. But actually, you'll see that players will get to pick them. Like, one team will be picking into this rock, paper, scissors where they win. We might see a lot of blowout games. I think that happened quite a bit in the TSL already. Players forced to play these 4 different factions. We see a lot more viability. We see a lot more factions getting played. But we see a list getting, quite literally, we at the Humble London Smugglers, we joke about calling it being thrown to the wolves, which is the 4 of us are playing a game each week. We need to win 3 matches, and whoever happened to get paired up against the opponent's Stark player, that's fine. They'll probably lose. The other 3 of us will win. We'll get 3 points. It doesn't matter. Maximum points win. But whoever got thrown to the wolves almost definitely loses their game, and because the matchup's just not good. And so I think we'll see a lot more of that, particularly with things like mammoths and dragons coming along. There'll be a lot more bad matchups in that way. And I don't think that's good for the individual player, even if it is relatively balanced across the whole team. Anyway, the pairings of the teams, what it actually is it says that the process of pairing players depends on the number of players per team. If you have 3 teams, 3 players in a team, you're going to choose a Lord, and then each team chooses 1 Bannerman, and then they pair the 2 players that they've chosen, and then the last 2 get paired. Pretty much this means that the pairings are random. So I'm team A, you're team B. I just pick somebody in secret, and it pairs up against your secret person. Now I pick one of yours, and you've picked one of mine in secret, and they get paired up, and then the last 2 people just get paired up. So we we have randomly selected. To pretend that there's some player agency there is not true. But the 4-player one is quite different, and definitely does have some agency, shall we call it. Each team begins with a Lord. The other team, and then the other 3 players are all Bannermen. The 2 Lords get paired up together. Team A, if that's me, I choose 2 of my Bannermen. And then you pick one of your players to play against one of my 2, which is definitely you getting to select the matchup. And then, specifically, because you chose the matchup, I get to choose whether I deploy first or go first. Quite an important rule, and I think it is interesting. And then in response, you have 2 Bannermen left, and I will choose which of those 2 plays against one of my players. Which, again, because I've chosen the matchup, you will choose first turn or second turn. It is interesting. So we've got that almost acceptance that I've picked the matchup, and there are rock, paper, scissors matchups that I will win because of the way I picked it, and therefore it's going to give you an advantage. I'm not sure about the ramifications of knowing already who's going to pick first turn before you start deploying terrain. I'm not a big fan of that. It means that, even forget terrain. Let's say it's Game of Thrones, and we're going to deploy 5 objectives. I can, if I want, basically force. I know that I get to pick side or turn. I can force the board to be asymmetrical in most cases. You can say, oh, well, I'll just mirror it. But like mirroring isn't always the best strategy for every player. If basically I know I get to pick sides, so I get to dictate a lot of stuff. If I want the objectives to be really close to the deployment zones, I place one close to a deployment zone. Even if you go next, you have to mirror with one on the opposite side close to a deployment zone. And again, I do it on the opposite side and you do it on the opposite side. Say I actually just want it to be a horrible melee right in the middle, I place them in the middle, and you also have to mirror by placing in the middle because you don't want the objectives to be asymmetrical because you know that I will just pick the stronger side. It is interesting. We'll see what the fallout is. It is an interesting balance to the fact that I've selected the matchup, therefore you get to pick side. It could work. I'm not against it. What's interesting about the whole thing is that it means one of two things to me. Let's put it this way: the whole fact that they have put out this this tournament system, this teams tournament system, this tournament document at this time, it means only one or two things in my mind. It means either 1, absolutely nothing at all, which I'll elaborate on in a second, or it means 2, it means an absolute ton of stuff is coming. So why does it mean nothing at all? Because team tournaments, obviously there is the TSL, which has been relatively big. Maybe they've been watching it, thinking that it's interesting or whatever about that part. But in physical events, physical tournaments, team tournaments are incredibly rare. I've never ever heard of one being run for A Song of Ice and Fire. There are 1 or 2 per year, per country, at absolute best. Practically 1 or 2 per year, per continent. So like in Europe, for the biggest game systems there are. We're talking about the European Team Championships for Warhammer 40,000 and Age of Sigmar, and it's 20, 30 teams of 4 players meeting up in Central Europe to play a team event. There is a lot more interest in A Song of Ice and Fire for like doubles tournaments. I've seen loads of people play them, but I've never seen somebody ever play A Song of Ice and Fire in a team tournament format. The biggest tournament we've ever had had just under 100 people in it. If you turned that into 4-player teams, you'd get 20 teams, 20-ish teams, which would basically be a team event. And that would be great if you did that once a year. It seems like a whole lot of effort for a format which is very easy for a tournament organizer to put together. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure most of these other games that run team format tournaments don't have documents like this needed. They don't need to tell you about how teams get selected. They're just things that the tournaments do. So, either you've just wasted all your time on building this document, answering a question which didn't exist in the community because the community aren't playing team tournaments at the moment and won't be playing team tournaments in the future, particularly the near future, because of COVID, making big tournaments particularly hard. Especially, you can even run like leagues. That's what we're seeing being most popular at the moment. Leagues where players play on their own time. 2 players meet up, organize a game, play a game. But that's completely non-compatible with the whole we pick our lords and our bannermen and have different matchups and stuff like that. That's not compatible with the team tournament at all. So either it's nothing and it won't happen and we'll not see it get used almost at all, or I really do hope it's the or, which is that Simon are about to announce a ton more organized play stuff, and more specifically, they're about to get involved and create very, very big competitions. I'm talking things with very big prizes, hopefully, paying for people to travel to events and stuff like that. Either they're about to push competitive very, very hard with their organized play that they have been working on for over a year. Either this is the first indication that organized play is about to come at us like an absolute storm and completely revolutionize the game, or nothing's about to happen. So I really, really hope it's the second. I really, really hope that it's an indication that organized play is about to get ramped up to 10. And that this is just one of many things that they have planned. If not, then I think it's a very mistimed attempt of watching the community and what they're doing and thinking that's what makes it popular. No, the TSL wasn't popular because it was a team tournament. It was popular because it's a TTS event that's free to enter and has and focuses on participation and enjoyment of the game. It's nothing to do with the fact that it's team. Like, that part wasn't important. And so if they think that that's the part that they needed to dial into, I think they'll be very disappointed at the fact that people aren't just going to magically start running team tournaments in their local stores. Most local decent sized tournaments would be happy to get to 20 people. That would be like 5 teams, which is not like, that's not a tournament. If you had 5 individuals enter a tournament, you practically can't do Swiss draw. Loads of things start to go wrong at those numbers. If we aren't talking about like 32, 64 player events, then team format is not worth running at all. Even if you're trying to like help newer players get involved in the game, that doesn't work with the way that you've done your team pairings and stuff like that. Again, what's been successful has been people running doubles formats with like an experienced and inexperienced player and stuff like that. I actually would have much rather seen an official set of like tournament document to how doubles got done, maybe even with like changing pairs and stuff like that, maybe list requirements around that, because that is things that people have actually put together tournament documents for their own tournaments for. People have actually been running those events as like a second day kind of thing. I've never seen a team tournament format in A Song of Ice and Fire in person, which is presumably what they're focused on, because I don't believe that they are focusing on TTS here. So that's my feelings on the tournament document. It could go one of two ways. It's either been a complete mistimed nothing, or it's about to lead into a ton of things. So we can only look forward to hoping that it's the second. And yeah, I'm totally in the dark as to what the organized play plans are. I'd love to be able to tell you that A Song of Ice and Fire Stats has some kind of inside track on that, and that we're working together to make sure that organized play works on the website. But no idea. I think I don't think they will release that until it's way too late for the site to be able to do anything about it. So in lack of all that, that is a new way that you could play your tournaments. If you are lucky enough to have that kind of player participation, if you happen to be able to already run tournaments with about 32 players, then sure, run a team event. I think it will be great. It probably is really good at those kind of numbers. Anything less than that, and I think you might as well have just played an individual event. And then you haven't forced players to pick certain factions, forced them to have list building requirements that aren't really necessarily fair. You haven't forced them to play into matchups that are really rock, paper, scissors bad for them. Instead, let's move on to talk about the fact that I have, and should we just say, A Song of Ice and Fire Stats has been working on another kind of way to run tournaments. Listening a lot to people in the community about what they want from events, what they actually use, actually looking at the way events are run. And so I've added some new changes to the way a tournament can be made, things that can be allowed. As I discussed, TTS, running over a long period of time, the TSL, big tournaments, stuff like that. And also in person, what we're seeing, you see a big Spanish event called like Clash of the Metas, or like Clash of the Regions is kind of what they what I believe it roughly translates as, which is running through the site and has a huge number of sponsors attached to it now and a huge number of players. I believe they total 150 players in the kind of like overall event. It's been running. It's very, very sensible, very good idea. It's run in 11 different regional stores or gaming clubs or whatever they are. 11 different tournaments, effectively, 11 different regional events that qualify you for a further tournament. The regional events are running through November and December, I believe, possibly even all the way into January. So these are leagues that run week to week, so it only takes 2 people to meet up to play their game at any time during the week. And of course, over this long period of time, lots of people, what they want is they want to be able to change their lists. This isn't a 2-day, 1-day tournament anymore. The CMON document for the team tournament and for normal tournaments specifically says, once a tournament begins, you may not change your lists. But people are coming much more around to this idea of a tournament not running on a day anymore. It runs across a period of time. TTS makes that once a week. I think the league will be running roughly like once a week. These players will meet up at their store at any time that fits them when the store is a lot quieter. Thus, for COVID reasons, we don't have to have 150 people in a venue trying to play an event together. But there are roughly 150 people around Spain as a whole country playing each week in their various matchups. And the net effect is exactly the same, it just takes longer. But over this longer period of time, we're seeing that people want to be able to change their lists, they want to be able to change their commanders, they want to be able to stay invested and involved in an event if their lists don't work immediately. In the first couple of rounds, they might decide that actually their list needs changes, and we find that players become no longer invested in the event if they're being forced to keep it. So added 3 new options based on like how extreme you want to be with this, which is that you can allow people to make list changes during the event, you can allow players to change their commanders during the event, and you can even allow players to change their faction. The third one wasn't really requested, but since I was doing the other 2, it was all roughly the same kind of amount of coding, so I just threw in the third one just in case anybody wants to be crazy. As far as the site's concerned, you have to, that is like a tiered system, shall we say. If you can change commanders, you have to be able to change lists. Because when you change commander, your list changes. If you can change factions, you have to be able to change commanders. So, that is lists or lists and commanders, or lists, commanders, and faction as your 3 different options of things that you can have, or the normal format, which is once the tournament begins, it's fixed. So they're all there for your new leagues, your new options, your new tournaments, all that kind of stuff. Hopefully people will enjoy that and like that. If you select them, players can log into the tournament and change them at any time. So, do be aware that there is a reason why they're normally fixed, which is that a player can somewhat gain an advantage if they could pick a list specifically into every given game mode that they're about to play. They could tailor it knowing what faction that their opponent's about to play. So that's a very different way of playing. Let's put it that way. That's a different way to play the game. And it could lead to big changes. It could lead to big changes in results. But I wouldn't just like click them and say, oh, yeah, let people change just because you feel like it. That's only if you specifically think that there is a reason why players will want to change their lists over the period of time. And so that one's been implemented pretty much directly by request. It was basically something that I've been thinking about doing because of the way people have been thinking about doing it for the TSL and stuff. But the Spanish tournament quite literally said they want to change they want to be able to change their lists and commanders during the event. So I built that for them, and I think that everyone else will get a lot of use out of it too. The other thing that I've been working on, another by request, is some people have been running campaigns, map-based campaigns, maybe first in battle campaigns, where the games themselves aren't necessarily even. And they wanted to be able to log them on the site, but it's not right for terms of ELO and stats kind of balance for the game, because the game isn't balanced. So to take the result of that game and apply an ELO change across the site because of it is not the right fit. So I created a special event called uneven campaign play. It will even ask you, like, are you sure you want to make this a campaign? And it tells you what that means. In doing so, your results will be marked against the players. Their ELOs won't change, but they will have it there in the results history to look at and kind of check the lists and see for future reasons and all the things that go along with what something in your results history does. But it will not go into the results history of the commanders or the faction, and it will not change anybody's ELO. It's not done in calculations in that way. So that is there by request again for people who are using those kind of events. But the thing that I've actually been working on and was implementing at the same time is a new system called ELO Handicapped. So as I was hinting way back when, at the start of this video, must have been like half an hour ago now, as usual, once I get started, can't stop. So when you enter any result on a Song of Ice and Fire stats, it normally takes your player rating, your opponent's player rating, and then it applies a modifier to each of those based on what commander you're using, what faction you're using. It comes up with an overall rating of who you with that faction are, and your opponent with whatever faction and commander they are, and then calculates what it thinks the expected chance of you each to win is. It uses this number to work out how valuable it is in terms of ELO change. If you are really high rated and you use a high rated commander and you beat a low rated player who's using a low rated commander, then it expects you to win 90-95% of the time anyway. And so it's not going to improve your rating by very much for doing so. It won't improve that commander's rating very much for doing so. And it won't penalize your opponent very much or reduce that one. In reverse, if that player who is low rated with a low rated commander beats you as a high rated player with a high rated commander, it's like that's a very, very unlikely event. We should change the ELO values of all these players that are involved, the factions that were involved, the commanders that were involved. We'll change them by a large amount because it's a very long way away from what we thought was going to be the outcome. That's how the ELO system works in general. I've spoken that on loads of times, and you can look at what the expected outcome of a game is when you look at the power rankings. Normally, what's been happening, though, is even though it does that in tournaments, as well as in normal game submissions, players are still using the highest rated commanders because they win games. And winning games means winning tournaments. Even if it doesn't actually give them very much player rating, we still see the same commanders again and again being used. That's pretty much the top 10 are just constantly used. It's like the top few from each of the good factions are all in the top 10. It's Howland Robb, some Lannisters, Courtney, some Free Folk is pretty much what the top 10 is. And we just see those same few being entered continuously and winning continuously. And And even though all of those players are being handicapped in how much ELO they get given, the system doesn't reward them very much for winning those games or even for winning the whole tournament, because it's like, well, you used the best commander. I expected you to win anyway. Even though it doesn't give them much, they still win the tournament, and people care about that more than they care about what their rating change will be. And so we're not seeing the ELO value having the effect that it wants to have, which is it wants to force you to be creative. It wants to force you to use different commanders. It wants you to receive bonuses for taking on the challenge of playing Targaryens, playing neutrals, playing these factions that are struggling. The best players should be relishing the challenge of these really low-rated factions rather than avoiding them because they want to win the tournament. And so what this does is it's going to apply that same kind of multiplier calculation to the tournament points that you score. It's not exactly the same calculation, so it ignores the player ratings, so you're not handicapped for being a good player and having a high rating. Instead, it just takes your commander and your faction and compares it to your opponent's commander and faction and works out what the win percentage of yours is versus theirs. If I'm going to win the game, like 60% of the time, then it's going to apply... the maths gets a bit complicated, but at about 60% win rate, it's going to apply a 1.2 multiplier to the person who was only expected to win 40% at the time, and it's going to apply a 1.2 division to the score of the person who was expected to win. What that means is if I win the game with the higher rated commander, I should score three tournament points. But actually, I'll score about 2.5. And we use, it actually goes to like 10 decimal places, but it will show you to the first decimal place. We're not just working to full round figures anymore in terms of tournament points. It also gets applied to secondary points, so it matters for all those things, but the tournament points will be so separated now, I don't think secondary points will come into it much. In response, my opponent who lost should have scored 1 tournament point, but they will score 1.2 tournament points. Not a huge thing right there, but 60% win chance is actually 2 commanders that are very closely rated to each other. So we're not going to have a huge effect on those tournaments. If we're actually talking about like Howland playing Drogo, top rated commander in the whole game, playing the current lowest rated commander in the whole game, the multiplier is greater than 2. What this means is if you win, you will score less than 1.5 tournament points. And if I lose but play Drogo, I will score more than 2 tournament points. That means that because you were so expected to win, I actually get more than you for losing with that commander. If I win, God forbid, if I win, I will score more than 6 tournament points, and you'll score less than half a tournament point. This basically says, don't use the top 10 rated commanders in this event. You can only underachieve. You can only not do as well as you're expected to do. And it's slightly heavy-handed, and I am running some testing with some players. We'll be running a tournament to see how it actually plays out, how lower rated commander or like what commanders actually end up winning the event. But it is a relatively, heavy-hitting, over-the-top way of forcing players to not use the top-rated commanders anymore. I do believe it's actually 100% fair, as in the system, we've gotten to the point, if you look at the ELO scoring system and the match predictor, it's gotten to a point where Howland is so much higher rated, and Rob and some of the Lannister ones as well are so much higher rated than every other commander that it is an almost foregone conclusion that they will win the game 4 times out of 5, 9 times out of 10, 80 to 90% win rates against opponents with the same level of skill. Skill is, of course, very, very much more difficult to measure. But as far as the site is concerned, these commanders are so significantly better that it doesn't want you to use them. Like, it's as simple as that. The site doesn't want you to use these commanders anymore. That is boring. and that is what's causing the stagnation in the tournament scene. If you enjoy them, you want to play them with your friends, and that's a good, even balanced game for you, then that's fine. But if you're playing Rob into low-rated commanders, you have such an inherent advantage that it's uninteresting for tournament play. So the site is basically saying, here's the ELO values. We're going to use them to work out who has the highest player skill as a player. Almost a question of who's willing to risk running the weakest commander in the game and can still win with him. And we will reward that player the most. That player will undoubtedly win if you are running low-rated, and I mean actually like bottom-rated commanders and winning games, then you will almost definitely win in the ELO handicap. And I think that that's good. Like, we'll see how it pans out. Like I say, there's some more testing in terms of the actual multiplier, whether or not it needs to be slightly adjusted. I have actually already brought it down from where it could be. It's already not as extreme as it kind of was when I first mapped it out mathematically. So, if you think that it's quite a large multiplier now, God, you should have seen it before. But anyway, this is an ELO handicapped event. I will be running some tests. And you know what? I think it's going to become a norm in the future unless something comes along that makes CMON more involved in the balance of the game. Unless something comes along that makes the game suddenly way more balanced than it currently is. I don't want us ever to return to, a situation, even if quarter 4 releases come out, there'll be a new balance, but I still believe it will be, these are the winning commanders, these are the losing commanders. Don't play losing commanders, don't play these 2 or 3 factions, don't play the Baratheons anymore, they just get eaten by dragons. Don't, Starks still win, Free Folk still win, Mammoths are great, whatever it is, I think that we will very quickly find that stability again. If CMON continue to only update the game once a year, things like that, I don't want us to be in a situation where it's just stale again. And so I think that this will keep things continually fresh and is a very, very challenging tournament for players to play in, and very good for players of all skill levels. This is truly an event where you can play whatever commander you like literally just like and enjoy. Whatever commander suits your style the best, whatever commander you are most familiar with, and you will not be penalized for it. Unless it just so happens that the thing you like is the very best commander in the game, and you only really like it because it's the commander you win with. In which case, well, you are going to get penalized, unfortunately, because you're playing the commander that's supposed to win, so we expect you to win. I hope that people like it. Like I say, it's not quite tested yet, and yet it's on the site. So if you want to run an event using it, then feel free. I would love to hear your feedback. I will definitely look at it anyway. Whatever tournament you run on the site, I look at 100% of those results. So I'm always interested to see, and I will look closely at who wins that event if you do run one. If not, then I'm running some events at the moment, or just about to, because the big thing that I haven't really talked about is based on that same set of not enthusiasm for playing another tournament right now, no enthusiasm for the game, particularly on TTS, no enthusiasm from the TTS community to want to take the quarter 4 releases and play with them, not straight away at least. The World Cup is being postponed until January for the regional events, which means that the second part will be pushed, the knockout period will be pushed into February. I hope that increases the sign-ups. If not, then I guess we have a big issue and people just don't want to play in this World Cup that I've organised. But most people claim, at least at the moment, that the reason why sign-ups aren't higher is because of fatigue based on all the tournaments that have run from TSL. So I hope that if people are genuinely fatigued, then they take a break and come back for the World Cup, because it's going to be a really big event, as opposed to just signing up to the other events that fill the space, because people will just fill the space. It's very easy to run TTS tournaments at the moment because of Song of Ice and Fire stats. You just stick it up there and put some posts on Discord, Facebook, and you'll get some signups. We see some. There's a Canadian tournament. There is Wolves Howling. These are tournaments that I will be entering because when I TO an event, I don't enter it. So I'm always happy that other people are running events. I believe I'm almost adamant, and hopefully I haven't forced. I hope nobody would think that I've forced George's hand in terms of the TSL and season 2, which was originally stated that it would be in January. I had spoken to him, and he was effectively 100% sure that he was moving it to later in the year. So hopefully nobody thinks that I've just somewhat bullied George into moving the World Cup. But I think he's going to announce that like in a day or two or something like that. But, I'm not trying to make the announcement for him, but I need to make the announcement that the World Cup is moving because it is very soon, or it was originally planned to be very soon. So now that is going to be when the TSL previously was. Hopefully, I really do hope that he now moves the TSL because the two won't run in conjunction very well together. That will definitely cause people to not sign up to, well, at least one of them. Probably meaning that they won't sign up to the World Cup because I know lots of people are very engaged with the TSL and what it's done. It's been a great event. So, World Cup has moved. New tournament format, both in terms of a whole new format which will change all tournaments soon in 2021. God, life just goes on by with COVID, right? I think that the new ELO handicapping system, actually, I think it could become a norm for all Song of Ice and Fire tournaments. I would love to be able to say in 6 months' time, I sort of like shot the gun on that one, and CMON are balancing the game every 3 months. But I don't think it's going to happen. So even if they bring out some balance changes and they work for a while, it doesn't take too long before people figure it out and decide what the new best things are. So hopefully ELO handicapped events will always fill that gap and will keep things fresh and keep new ideas constantly coming to the surface. There is the team tournament document, and I really do hope that it means that there are huge things organized by CMON on the horizon coming in 2021. I don't know how they would ever. Maybe I'm speaking from a UK-centric perspective here. I don't know how they'll be organizing really big team events in 2021 at all. Like, I'm talking about the whole year. Maybe I'm being a little bit pessimistic, but 6, 8, whatever months it is since lockdown and COVID became a big issue, things are no better in the UK. I had been talking with Chris Eustace and some people who run a big London event about organise something in March, but that event is already cancelled now, 6 months out, that they won't be able to commit to anything. They're looking at maybe running it again in the summer. So hopefully what they call kind of like convention season, like across the summer of next year, maybe some events will run. So we're talking about 9, 10, 11 months from now, we might be getting back to events. So maybe that's the kind of timescales that CMON are talking about. But it's a long way out for a tournament, team tournament document there. I think we got some good stuff coming. I'm trying to fill the gap with some good stuff because I think CMON have left way too long a window. They might be closing it. They might be bringing out some good stuff. But if not, then just keep using the site because we'll fill the hole. We'll keep the competitive community going. And more than that, we'll keep everybody informed. That's what the site tries to do, not just like be a tournament page. It's not just about that. It's not about meta listing. It's about keeping everybody excited with the game, finding out if there are issues about why you are always losing to your friend, you can find, oh, well, actually, he just plays like a really top tier list. And then you can like find that there are more interesting ways to play. If your opponent just says that they're better than you when all they ever do is play Rob, then, well, they're not, are they? Tell them to use somebody else. Show them that the stat site thinks that you should win 90% of the time when you play Rob anyway. And maybe you'll feel better about yourself. I guess gone completely off track, as always. So I'll see you next week. And check out the Tourney Ground, and check out Small Council Radio, where I was on just last Tuesday, whatever day this ends up being, coming out on, because that was a good discussion about all the top commanders and different ways that we can try and counter them. Even had somebody phone in, uses the site, all that kind of stuff. Love working with Small Council Radio. So I'll see you guys soon.